Hello and welcome to Holistic Circle Podcast, Spiritual Conversation. My name is Philip Kobold. We are reaching out to people who are passionate about spreading light, love, and joy and magic. From beautiful Pennsylvania, Josh Lar. Hello, welcome, Josh.
Well, hi, thank you for having me. And thank you for having me so late, because it's almost the witching hour, isn't it?
Yeah, I thought it was by design.
I've been saving that one all week. That's it.
You know what? I actually thought about this a day ago. So, but we're jumping right in. I mean, you were giving away hints with your lovely blouse that you're wearing. I can see the Gandalf, the gray beard. So you're putting a little bit of twinklies already.
You could have a good beard if you're going to be a magician. You know what I mean?
I don't know anything about it. So this is why we're here. We're going to learn. We're going to explore. We're going to have such a great time. So let's start with, if you'd be so kind, to give a bit of a personal background, who you are, what you do, just a couple of minutes so people get to know you, and then we'll, I don't know, disappear or reemerge, or we will see.
Turn into a toad. But, oh, yeah. So I'm Josh. I'm with Coven. It's Riverstone Coven at outlook.com if you want to reach out or have any questions. But I've been practicing Gardnerian Wicca, Gardnerian traditional Wicca. I've been a third degree for almost 10 years now. And even before that, it was about 6 years of like intensive study and circling and all the rest of it. And even before that, there was even more magic, where I was, I think, more of a ceremonial magician than identifying as a witch. But this magical arc went from, like, oh my gosh, I'm going to be this ceremonial magician, and I'm going to have my table and my robe and my sword and my staff and all the rest of it. And then I met my wife, and she was much more pagan than I was. In fact, she's my high priestess of the coven, right? We're a married couple, but she couldn't be here today. But it went from this arc of, oh, I need all of this like magic kit, to, you don't need all of this magic kit to do magic, right? You can just be you and be in love with the world and experience the mysteries. And you don't need a gold scepter and a fancy jewel and a wild hat, but I have a hat. But you don't need these things. You can do it with sticks and rocks, and approach the world with a childlike awe in your heart. And that's really where I landed. I think that's what felt like coming home to me. And that's why we're doing what we're doing. And we've been doing it for 15 years together. It's really been a great experience.
Absolutely, but we are really overtaking our audience here. You're 20 years in the business, but
Yeah.
we want to bring people in, and we want to take it a step slow. I know you have tons of knowledge, and I'm most probably going to make a very poor use of the great knowledge you have, but we need to bring people to the table who've never heard about Wicca, who've never heard Gardnerian,
Gotcha.
Hermetics, whatnot, magic. So we need to a little bit bring them in, at least spend 15 minutes at least, to just slowly, because people don't know what is pagan magic, or the thing that you're doing now that comes natural, that manifesting things with spirits and beliefs and stuff like that, versus a ceremonial magic. So I think we need to take it slow and explain people, why is this good for, what is a bit of the biggest tradition that brings it all. Just a couple of minutes, let's bring people to the table.
Sure. So I think what the differences between ceremonial magic and witchcraft is, ceremonial magic still is very Christian, and it relies a lot on the intercession of either saints or the magician or something like that. I think that witchcraft, a lot of us come into it just because we love nature, right? Like, I'm a tree hugger. I love nature. I like being outside. I do outdoorsy stuff all the time with me and the kids, all the rest of it. Like, the thing that brings joy to my heart is running around catching frogs, with and, going through, watching my kids, they'll get the water bottle out and they'll make potions, right? It's fun and it's lighthearted, but I also find it spiritually satisfying, right? I think that if that's the sort of thing that appeals to you, you might be.
Well, then I'm clearly a witch, that's for sure. Well, I never crossed my mind, but
Yeah.
I'm a tree hugger as much as the next man. And I love my crystals, and I take them very seriously, and I bathe them, and I do the whole thing.
Mhm.
I'm very particular, with my crystals. But let's talk. So can you just give us a quick historic background? Where's ceremonial magic coming from? Where do we find it these days? Maybe you can name one or two organizations. So people understand this is like the more, as you said, serious stuff with the whole team and the golden scepter and stuff like that, where people follow certain rules and protocols. And to which end? So where can we find it? Where it's coming from? And to which end? What you do, I think, is closer to the heart of my audience. Many of them are clairvoyant. Many of them are most probably much closer to the things that you do now. So we, I think, have to give them a bit of a background with ceremonial magic before we then really can go to your world, because that's what my audience naturally understand.
Yeah, the ceremonial magic started out, I think, because I was raised in a very traditional Christian household, right? And a lot of that leans heavily on quoting verses and Christian vestments, and there's angels and demons and that kind of stuff. There's holy water. People used to steal the holy water from the church font back when it was out in front of the church. We don't really have that in America, but it's very common in Europe. The ceremonial magician concerns themselves, I think, with the laws of the universe and sort of where the planets are aligned and what star is where, and what's casting horoscopes and what's afflicted and what's exalted and those sorts of things. And it's complicated and it's fun. I mean, I work in technology, so I like solving puzzles, of course, and mathematics. But after a while, it just felt like more work to me. Darn it! And I wasn't really comfortable with this worldview that the world was necessarily evil. Again, I love nature. I don't view the natural world or the physical space as evil like some of the Gnostics would have. And so I was never comfortable in that space per se. And I said, well, we can make it work. And I love puzzles. I love mathematics. I love John Dee. I've written miles upon miles of commentary on his Enochian system. But, at the end of the day, I just wanted to go outside. And I think that there is some level of overlap with that, right? Like why is water holy, why can water be holy, or what is holy oil, or how do we make these things, and what spirits are out there in nature. But at the end of the day, I don't necessarily need the Bible. I'm not saying that it's bad or anything. I'm just saying I don't personally need it. And I don't feel like I'm comfortable with calling on angels to bind down demons and that kind of stuff, as a lot of ceremonial magicians do. I think that as a Wiccan, especially as a traditional Gardnerian, we don't have an adversarial relationship with nature, and we don't believe in sin. We've got the god and the goddess, and that we call them down into circle and within us, and we have that direct relationship with our gods, which we then celebrate through our ritual. And that's much more appealing to me than the ceremonial magic stuff.
And there's Hermetics. Where did that come into place? Where does this fit in this place?
So Hermeticism really spawns in the Middle Ages and gets popular in the Middle Ages. It's Neoplatonism. It really is. So all of the things which Plato wrote, they almost hold as very true, and the underpinnings of magic. And the French basically said, hey, we've got all of this stuff which is ancient. It's not. It was kind of a bit of a wink, wink, nudge, nudge kind of a thing. But, they said, hey, it's ancient and it's the forerunner to Christianity and so on and so forth. I think it's just over designed. It's not really my jam. I understand it, but at the end of the day, I don't want to figure out the secrets of turning lead into gold. I'm okay working for a living.
Now you're talking about the alchemy angle that also comes into play into all of this.
Yep. Yeah.
And so you would say that traditional magic is closer to alchemy and hermetics, or this is really something totally on its own?
So ceremonial magic is, there's a lot of hermetics in there. There's a lot of alchemical transformation in there. When you talk about the Golden Dawn and those sorts of organizations, they were trying to make like a Summa Magica, like this is the entirety of magic, and I've put it in my book, and this is all there is to know about magic. And it's not true, right? Because magic is not your car. You don't go out there and turn on your car and then you drive somewhere. Magic is much more like you have this relationship with these spirits. You have these, like, it would be like if you raised your horse by yourself. You'd have a really deep relationship with this horse. Maybe you love horses. I love horses. But the horse helps you out, but you've taken care of the horse. You have this deep relationship with the horse, you know?
All right. So anybody, you're right. Anybody who wants to go deeper, there's the internet. Google yourself out. And we are not here for a historic lecture. I will invite some professor with an even more scrappy beard than yours, and give him let us help us with the history. And I have some people in mind. So now we're moving on from this comparison and just really looking your world. I think the first thing I have to ask you is, there's no way I cannot ask you, but when people hear magic and magician, they was probably, so what can you do? Like, you know, what tricks you have up your sleeve? That was, I guess, with how people see it. So, you know, can you do something? You know, so I have to ask you, but what can I do?
Oh my goodness. Well, I'll tell you a story. It was kind of a touching story, because I think that there is physical manifestations and there is magic that you can do. And so we were in circle one time, and it was around Halloween, Samhain, however you want to say it, right? Because everybody has their own name for it. But it was around Halloween. Shirt is very appropriate. And the Wicca, Gardnerian Wicca, has a concept of the mighty dead who help you out with your magic. You know, sort of these people who are not incarnated at the moment. They've passed on. They may reincarnate at some point in the future, because it is a fertility religion, right? So there's that whole aspect to it. But as we were calling on this person, we did our circle, and of course we're all sky clad. We're not wearing clothes. Right. That's what that means, because there's part of being Gardnerian is you don't wear clothes in circle. And one of the coveners, one of the people who were in the circle, stepped on a bobby pin, a hairpin. And we were like, where did this hairpin come from? Nobody wears hairpins. I mean, I've got most of my hair. Wife has got all of her hair. Everybody has all of her hair. We're like, where did this come from? Especially because we're skyclad, right? There's nowhere to hide it. I hope. There's nowhere to hide it, and we don't know where it comes from. After circle, it finally dawned on us that the, person we were trying to bring into circle and aid us with what we wanted to get done, we were trying to help somebody with their health, they had passed on from cancer. And as part of that, their hair fell out as part of their therapy. And right, because we realized the hairpin was something that she would have had, and it's something that she would have possessed, because she used to take her wig and dress it up and clip it to her head. And it was like one of those moments where at the time it just seemed like so innocuous, and here I am getting excited and choked up over a hairpin. But it seemed so innocuous. But afterwards it was like, oh wow, that was a really touching moment that we found this thing, especially because we were trying to contact this person, and, here we are, and, we get one of these hairpins. I don't know. It's so weird to get choked up over a hairpin because it seems so insignificant, but that's sort of the essence of the circle, is there's supposed to be this love and comfort and familiarity with one another and this closeness of family. And then, a hairpin comes out of nowhere, and it was a neat experience. It really was. It made me feel really good about the circle.
Absolutely, and I think people getting a better understanding of what is going on there. I mean, men and women running naked through the woods. Things are looking up.
That's it, man. It's a fertility religion. At least traditional Gardnerian Wicca is a fertility religion, and I don't know if you can hear that background noise. I hope not, but I've experienced it 3 times, and that's what that thumping is. And I've got 3 kids, and it is a miracle. That's the central mystery, and that's how we partake with the gods, right? Because that's the thing that the gods can do, is create life, and that's their gift to us, is that we can create life.
It's I have to just remind people who are watching the podcast now that there was an episode recorded earlier this week with a Hermetic expert.
Oh yeah,
and so we had already a podcast this week. So this will be a little bit before I publish this podcast, and so people can jump back and forward and compare. And I can tell you, you're going to win this race already.
Oh, that's cool. That's the thing I like about your podcast is you have this wide breadth of guests. Some people just get laser focused on something. And, I was like, no, I like this guy's podcast. There's variety. I like that.
Yes, but it commercially so much better if I put focus.
Yeah, well, yeah. I know.
But I'm enjoying it, so who cares? Okay, this is great. Just quick, let's finish this up. So this Gardnerian and Wicca that you do this stuff, there are, of course, books and there's stuff to learn. How old are they, or are they mandatory? Can you just learn by yourself through the love of nature? Or you need to have this knowledge? And how old is it? You said most probably paganism is like at the beginning of time. So how does this work, the system that you are now engaged with those people to clean up the technicalities?
Oh, goodness. So if you really want to go back in time, let's board our time machine broom here. But if you really want to go back in time, there are cave paintings in France from antiquity, and that's what's painted on the wall. Is they have a god with horns, they have presumably a goddess, she's pregnant, there's babies coming out. Like that was what primitive man was thinking about. And that cave painting is probably 15,000 years old. I don't know the name of it off the top of my head, and I don't have any French, so don't make me say it. But they're like, this has been the mystery of mysteries since antiquity. It really has been. And you find that mystery of fertility and the creation of life all the way back from before there was written language. It's really true. Now, I'm not saying that you need to go to France and start out in a cave. Okay.
It's always great to go. It's always great to go to France and start out in the cave.
Right.
I say so myself.
Make some cave paintings. All right.
Exactly.
The
mushrooms.
Mushrooms. Oh, goodness. Yeah. Oh, don't get me started on that. Anyway, different podcast. The fast forwarding, you've got this pagan cult survives in Europe, and it really does. There's these people aren't necessarily writing things down. There's nobody who's like the official.
Are we talking about the Druids? In England, they're quite a long tradition.
In general. Paganism in general, then we'll figure out how to get you turned into a Gardnerian in no time. But the paganism in general has survived in Europe. Christianity is very much a political force in Europe as much as it is a religion. It's got to figure out how to coexist with pagans in Europe as time goes forward and all the rest of it. And this fellow, Gerald Gardner, who's sort of the person who made all of this public, he bumps into, he's living in Malaysia, right? As where he grew up. He comes back to Europe at the urging of his wife and for World War II. And he bumps into these folks at the theater. And he says he's interested in witchcraft. He's been studying knives and weaponry and rituals and ceremonialism over in Malaysia. He's, and somebody says something to him to the effect of, well, we've got our witch stuff over here too. And I think it's very important to notice that Gardnerian Wicca doesn't look like Malaysian religions. It looks like what you'd expect in European paganism, right? It is very European. Everything's written in English. You see some imports here and there, but really it's clear that it's its own thing. So he gets initiated. And in fact, there's a sort of a funny moment where after he's initiated, he's appearing on the BBC. He's doing podcasts. No, he's on the BBC and he's running his mouth. And one of the other people in his coven says, well, if you don't stop running your mouth, basically, I'm going to complain to the elders. And like, that gets your brain going because you're like, who are the elders? If Gerald started this all, who would she complain to? Like, what other authority would there be? So you read this letter and you're like, who are the other people here? But anyway, Gerald gets into it because he's into nudism. He's into pagan folk beliefs. He's not a very good Christian. He's really looking for something else. And so he experienced this thing and he says, okay, this is it. This is what grabs me. This is what, makes me feel good. This is where I can get my mysticism from, and so on and so forth. I think that any person who wants to identify as a witch or a Wiccan or have the nature religion, they're totally fine. And Wicca is not the only game in town. There's Minoan Wiccan, there's Dianic Wicca, there's all of these other things floating around. There's Storhawk if you even want more politics in your Wicca with the reclaiming tradition. Gardnerian is not the only game in town, but Gardnerian is the only game in town that follows that fertility cult and says, hey, our central mystery of mysteries is the holy marriage, the great rite. The sperm meets the egg, and that's where we've gotten new life from. And I think that that's what kind of separates us. So for people who are looking to...
I think this was more than perfect and enough. And again, if people want to know more, because we have so much to talk about, I had to make an introduction, but I'm burning for the real questions. So people there's Google, go for it. You have all the pointers.
Josh gave you. If you want to be Gardnerian, read Gerald Gardner. He wrote a whole bunch of books. They're all great. In fact, every time something happens to you in Gardnerian Wicca, you should go reread Gerald Gardner. He wrote it all down. Go read his books.
So, finally, my first real question of the evening. And I'm absolutely interested and fascinated on the concept and the structure about initiation. It's one of the big mysteries to me of the concept of a person that is searching, the seeker, the whole idea of a seeker, and the process of finding, and then the mystery of initiation. And I'd love to spend a bit of time. You have such a vast knowledge, being initiated in many different places. So from your own experience, without spilling any beans, but just to understand the mindset and the approach, and also maybe the feeling that it creates, becoming part of a fraternity and becoming part of a family, an extended family. So I'd love to hear your take on this subject so very much.
Sure. I'll tell you about my own initiation as much as I can, right? You have to have some secrets. But I think that the initiation is your welcoming into the group, right? When you're seeking, and especially in Gardnerian Wicca, you're supposed to be sticking your head in these other groups and saying like, hey, is this right for me? I mean, when we're talking about people who we want to welcome into traditional Gardnerian Wicca, we want to get to know them. And we want to make sure that this is what they feel is their home base. This is the place they want to be. They want to be interested in the fertility religion. And they think about that kind of a thing. It's not just a social club. I think that a lot of other orders or fraternities are just exactly that, right? They're social clubs, maybe with some mysticism. And we're looking for people who are actually interested in this and feel it deep in their hearts. And so when you're looking for a group and a coven, you want to hang out with those folks at least for a year. I mean, as a seeker, it's just as much you looking for people as it is them looking for you. Is this group a good fit for you? Are you a good fit for them? And so on and so forth. So my initiation was funny because they wanted to do it like super traditional. So they didn't even tell me it was coming. It was just like a normal day. And, person who would be my high priestess invited me over her house and, asked me if I wanted to hang out. And I kind of knew something was up because it was like, okay, why does she just want to hang out? She doesn't want to tell me what's going on. Like it was in the back of my head that something was going to happen. Right. And so I get there and, it was really funny was my wife was in on it. So she was like, oh, I'm going out with my girlfriends. We're going to go to the mall. I was like, yeah, okay, whatever, go shopping. Not knowing that she had already planned this whole thing because she was in first, like she was initiated first. Right. Gardnerian Wicca is matriarchal, which is why. But I show up here and I walk through the door and suddenly I'm blindfolded. And it's like, oh no, now my heart's racing, right? Like something's happening. I'm being kidnapped. I don't know what's happening. It's the fellows I sold the pinball machine parts to. I don't know. But and then the next thing I know, there's a weapon pressed to my chest and I'm asked to take the secret and sacred oaths. And, can't tell you what those are. And then I'm being led around the room and I'm being spun and my clothes are coming off. And I'm like, oh, dear gosh, in any other context, this would be worrisome. But, it's fun. There's gestures and there's things that are said and there's things that happen. And the important goal of initiation is to not only welcome the seeker, but also make an impression on them. It's supposed to be a big event in your life. Like there's only that first crossing into the circle that you get to experience. And that's what makes it special and impactful. And in a lot of ways, it feels like coming home, right? Because now these people, I was friends with them, sure, but, we weren't talking philosophy in particular. We weren't like a tight-knit secret circle of people who were all, sharing the god and the goddess. And now I was in, right? It was a welcoming. It was a lot of fun. And with that came a lot more chewing the fat. Afterward, they're like, what did you feel? What did you learn? What do you remember? How did you feel? Did you feel like you met the god or the goddess? Do you feel safe? Do you feel this, that, and the other thing? A bit was scary. I'm not going to lie. A little bit was scary, but I think that's what made it so impactful, my welcoming into the craft.
I think this is so wonderful in a world of TikTok, and the world is the world. The world is always the world. But
Yeah.
these special corners of meaning, and is it a graduation of a kid? Is it a marriage ceremony? What not? It is these few beautiful moments we have that bring structure and meaning to our life. This is something that we all cannot have enough by the end of the day.
Oh yeah. I mean, it's great that you bring that up. It was exactly, how many times do people have like a big marriage ceremony? How many times do people have their first birthday? How many times do people have a funeral? I mean, there's definitely rituals in our lives that make huge impacts on us and make huge impacts on the people that we love. And this was definitely one of them. It's supposed to be that depth and that, that intensity.
I'm so sorry that I have to ask now a German question. I mean, it's impossible. Yeah. I'm embarrassed by myself.
Uh-huh.
But what can I do? Is genetically bound to ask. Because, some of these fraternities will have even similar sounding rituals. It's also quite costive, and it's not so cheap to join. You need all the costumes and everything, and you almost have to buy yourself in. My German question with Gardnerians, is it cost effective?
Cost effective. Okay, well,
this is unbelievable. I mean, what I'm doing here. Since I'm so sorry.
If I have to buy a Euro pass, is that going to be okay? I don't know.
It's so embarrassing.
It's been 20 years since I went to Germany, but you're definitely way warmer than the people I hung out with back then. But that's good. Is it cost effective? No, no, it's cost effective. You're not going to be buying a tuxedo. That's what got me at Freemasonry. I love Freemasonry. We did a lot of good work. We're definitely a fraternity. We fed the homeless, that kind of stuff. But it's not like Freemasonry where you've got to buy a tux if you want to participate, or you have to own a nice suit or a silk top hat. Who the heck owns one of those, right? My Masonic Bible's back there. But anyway, silk top hat. With Wicca, you're supposed to do it with the things that you can find around. I mean, you need a knife, but everybody's got a knife. You need a pentacle, but everybody's got a plate. You need candles, but everybody's got candles. You don't need thousands of dollars invested in statues. You don't need $1 million space. It's supposed to be something that anybody can do and anybody can welcome you in. You don't need a giant church. You don't need, you don't need to own a cave with cave paintings. You can do it with stuff that you've got around your house. Eventually, I did buy statues because I thought that I probably owed that to the god and goddess and their nice statues. Mm-hmm. I think this is kind of like the generic horned god that everybody has, but they're nice statues. But when we started out, it was his and hers candlesticks, basically. It wasn't gold-plated candlesticks either, right? These are candlesticks that we treated nicely and we respected, but they're candlesticks, The
reason I asked, beside my German genes, is simply the picture you gave, the honesty and the nature and all of it. Exactly when you talk about Freemasonry, depending on the fraternity, it can be quite a money to participate. It's again, there's a lot of different groups and so forth, but and so this feels much more honest and much more you, that this is something that you can create out of nothing. Of course, you can always buy a nice statue or things like this, but basically it really is the improvisation that the paganism sounds much more authentic. That's why I wanted, and also maybe some of our viewers don't want to have the silk top hat, right? Maybe some people want to have the feeling and want to have this. And that brings us now to maybe a little bit next in between question, that's much more normal question, is how do people approach? I mean, individualism is very high, narcissism is spreading for our society. This now is something, I'm part of a group. People not so much used to this kind of family and so on anymore. Do you think, need a bit more time entering, or people already come with the right mind, or is this becoming an issue? Or basically, we have enough people to fill your circle that are from the right mind from the start. Is there something happening in that direction?
So I don't think that we need to fill the circle, right? I don't feel like there's 13 seats at the table and every seat's got to be filled kind of a thing. Like, I'm not running a restaurant here. I don't need to sell it. I feel like especially because we don't charge money and we host it out of our magic room, which is a room in our house, right? We don't need to buy a church. So there's no dues. There's no expensive membership fees or anything like that. I think that we can, because we don't have that, because we're liberated from that financial burden and we don't charge money for magic, we can concentrate much more on the people and the needs of the people and the coveners and all the rest of that stuff. We've had times where, especially in the pagan circles, people who are not traditional Gardnerian yet, they've said things like, "Oh, well, can we prevent war in the Middle East?" And it's like, that's like, whoa, that's a heavy topic, but I'm sure we could work towards that, but that's not really what it's about, right? It's about, what problems do I have today and how can we help? What problems do you have today? Do you need a job? Do you feel okay? How's your health? Is your car got problems and you need a new car? Are you having marriage problems and maybe you want to calm things down? What can we do magic for that helps you personally as an individual, right? And we're not saying that there's not those big picture things. I mean, in Gerald's day in the Bricketwood Coven, they did magic to tell the Nazis that they couldn't invade England, right? But that's not real. That's an exception, right? That's a very rare thing. Usually what we're talking about
And it worked.
Need. It did. In fact, I think they went about it in a humanitarian way. They didn't try to hurt the everyman. They didn't try to destroy the land. They didn't try to have the moon crash down onto Europe. They said, hey, can we just put the idea out there that, this invasion won't be successful? And in my mind, that's great, because that's a compassionate solution that worked out for everybody in the end. I thought it was a great use of magic.
And they had leaders at the time who were not so alien to the whole concept.
Yeah. So I have seen that ritual. We do have that ritual written down, and it's a good ritual. And I think that was the correct way of doing it, because I think in the physical world, you do have a notion of scarcity, but in the magical world, especially if you're working for yourselves and your coven, there's, you don't need to hurt people. You don't need to harm people. You can find these sort of milder ways of getting the solution where, you don't have to worry about that scarcity. You have this spiritual treasure. And that's one of the other reasons why I really like Wicca. My wife is much better at this than I am. My wife is the one who's always like, let's try to find a nicer way of doing things, right?
I also meant the political scene at the time, and the political leaders at the time was so much more open to these also spiritual concepts and so forth. So it was just a different time. So
yeah, it was. Once England got rid of the Witchcraft Act, that everybody kind of came out of the woodwork. It's fun because now suddenly the witches are on the BBC and talking about witchcraft, and it's like, what is this? You read the history books, and 5 years before that, oh my gosh, people would be clutching their pearls. I mean, there was still pearl clutching, but it was much
forgetting.
Yeah.
Average person forget. They don't even know that the Witchcraft Act and so forth. So a lot of people are not into it. All right, we covered a lot of ground, and I think you started already. Now we're talking about the work and the healing and the chemistry in this group. So we a little bit bring people in the circle, if we may, whatever we can on this podcast too. As you already mentioned some stuff, I have, because people will not associate with magic, with like, oh, I have marriage problems, I don't find a solution, that there's a fraternity, a circle of magicians who have the magic to help you find ways out. And I think this needs a bit of a clarification here again, how we defined the word magic in this.
Oh, goodness. How could you define magic? I feel like magic is like, oh my gosh. You've caught me out. The magic is telling the gods what you need and telling the mighty dead, your ancestors, what you need and trying to find that solution. And we've done circles where we know exactly what needs to happen, whether somebody needs a job or they need to have an effective cancer treatment, or they have to, find a good deal on a car because they only have certain amounts of money. Like that's very obvious to me that that magic has a goal and it's clearly defined. But when the high priestess gets done casting the circle and we're in that sacred space, there's also room for divination. There's also room to say, I don't know what I need, or I don't know what will be the solution. And that's when you get into things like, should you do your tarot cards? Should you divine with runes? Should you smoke scry? Should you look at the I Ching? Should you use any of these systems to sort of ask the gods what might be a good solution? But there's also times when in circle, the high priest calls the god, or the high priestess calls the god down into the high priest, and then vice versa. The high priest calls the goddess down into the high priestess, and there's inspiration. There's all of a sudden an idea, like a literal lightning bolt to the head, where they come up with a solution, or they're inspired to say something, or the deity speaks through them and offers that solution. And a lot of times those moments are probably even more powerful than the tarot cards, because you're sitting there and you're like flipping out the cards or whatever and trying to divine meaning. But those moments where you get that lightning bolt and you suddenly understand is great. Huh? I'm sorry.
No, I'm sorry. I'm just so anxious to ask the question. It's
Sure.
ridiculous. Do you have actually special training or structure or a system with phrasing the questions? Or is it just something that you learn over time, how to ask the good question? I know there's a lot of philosophy and thinking in formulating the right question.
Sure. My wife likes this all the time. She's like, we've got to tell people without harming, because she's, there's that Wiccan read where ain and harm none, so mote it be, right? But let's say that you've got a very concrete problem of you need a new car, and you need a new car to go pick up your children and get to work. You're not asking for a Ferrari, although that would be fun. I've seen Top Gear. But you're not asking for a Ferrari. You're saying, I need a new vehicle to get to work and provide for my family. And if you just did that and you put it out there, how would the universe satisfy that? Would your rich uncle die? Do you want your rich uncle to die and you get the inheritance, your parents? Do you want to be in a horrific car accident where you sue somebody and you recover the amount of money to get a new car plus the insurance? Or do you say to the universe a little bit more specifically, I need a new car. I have whatever, $5,000, 5,000 euros. And can you help me find a car in that price range? And you still have to do the legwork, right? It's not Christmas where you ask for the Super Nintendo and you get a Super Nintendo. You've got to ask it of the gods, have the faith that they'll provide it for you. But then it's on you to do the legwork and go to the car dealerships and call around and look in the classifieds to find this vehicle. And I think that's an important phrasing also, is when you're working, that's the difference between, I think, Wicca and Hermeticism. When you're working with like angels and demons, you have this notion of morality, and then you get into Wicca and you're like, no, I can be specific, and it's on me to be a good citizen and play well with others and help, with the confidence that you'll get help too.
Why I'm so fascinated the last couple of weeks with this whole concept of the right question, the right prayer, because I think this is a thing we have forgotten, or we have.
Oh yeah,
it's for many people have forgotten to learn how to go a good prayer, because you now just brought us for the second into the complexity of the prayer, as you just said. I want the money. Well, your uncle has to die. I mean, the universe don't care in that sense.
I hope not.
Here you
yes.
go. Poof.
Yes.
So you really brought us to this. I've been spinning my head the last couple of weeks about this question: what can you actually ask consciously, and what has been also the question: what does angels at all care about? Right? Why would they definitely don't care for money, because they can't use it in heaven whatsoever? Maybe you ask for ambrosia, and maybe they don't want to share it because they want to drink it themselves. So, yeah. So it is. They're selfish too, angels. So it is a funny thought when you think about praying to something that's meaningful to a god or angel or higher spirit, they actually want to help you get it. And as when you said, I have to bring my children to school, that is most So you very cleverly, they actually want the car, but you know that the angels won't give it to you. But if you drive the children, you're sneaking it in.
Yeah, I mean, I think you can't be greedy is kind of the idea. Like, you'll get a nice car. Again, we're not talking to angels and demons. We're talking to the god and goddess, and we've got special names for them, right? So we know who we're talking to, but they have your best interests in mind. They're not gonna do terrible things. They're not gonna be malicious, I guess is what I'm trying to say. It's up to you to ask the right questions and be humble, but it's more of a friendship, than being on your knees and bowing your head and crossing your hands.
But there we again coming to the big divine. What your Wicca, what your work as Gardnerian is so different from other systems. This friendship, this personality, this whole more heartfelt approach to all of it. It is different. There are maybe our audience is not catching up, but there are vast differences in approach. Now, like next question, if you'd be so kind. You mentioned the forest. So how much of the rituals you're doing in nature, how much you're doing it in your apartment or other places? So what is here the protocol, and is the work in nature different from the work that you do?
Oh boy, that's a good one. It is a nature-based religion broadly. Right. I mean, traditional Gardnerian Wicca, I've said it's a fertility cult, but that's because Stone Age man was observing nature and saying, what's the most important part of nature, right? Is placing that emphasis on fertility. But all of our mysteries in Gardnerian Wicca are scoped first to the physical world and the observation of the physical world and the natural world, right? So I prefer to do ritual outside, deep in the woods. I'm fortunate enough that I have a nice patch of woods behind my house. It's really big, and we can go out there and we can do that, right? And I view it the same way as, hey, I need something again, the friendship, right? I need something from you, Philip. What should I do? I should go knock on your door. Well, I say, hey, I need something from the god and the goddess, and I want to go talk to them. I should go knock on their door, but their door's out there in the patch of woods behind my house, right? So when I go out there, we visit them. But at the same time, we also get snow. So you can't, you do what you can that's practical. Around Yuletide, we bring in holly, we bring in ivy, we bring in the pine boughs. You try to dress the place up and light candles and make it warm and cheery and remind yourself of that holiday spirit. But you also want to be in your own house where you've got heat. Kind of an idea. But that's outside is best, but don't hurt yourself.
I guess that you're very aware of the energy lines in the body, in the ground, that these are things that you're looking at. I guess this has always been part of pagan spirituality, that there are special places of power, places of worship. I guess all of these are things that we can expect from work that you've been doing, I am assuming. Now, also, I guess in paganism, do you work with magical things, as I said, with water or transitioning? Is this also part that you do those more ritualistic, magical things, potions and stuff?
Oh, yeah, goodness. So I'm going to send your readers down the Google rabbit hole again. In the book, what's it called? Hamlet's Mill. They talk about that kind of thing, these places of power, what the ancient pagans were looking at, why Stonehenge aligns to the planets, all those sorts of things, because those spots are real. There are places that are just holy, right? And I'm not going to brag, but as an American, we still have places that are genuinely wild, that haven't been logged, that haven't been farmed, that haven't had a road driven over them, and that kind of a thing. And there are still those places, even in Pennsylvania, which is one of the older places in the United States. But there are still those sorts of places where the wild things live, right? And I think that anybody who spends enough time out there has bumped into not only wild animals, but like wild spirits. And now the name is going to escape me, Landvetter. And they're out there and they do things and they exist. And it's not just wild animals, but that is a notion of wild spirits. But also when you talk about the elements, there's a lot of work with those elements. And when you talk about witch training, I think Donald Michael Craig's Modern Magic, is a really good book about just working with the elements and what that can do for you, and the pentagram ritual and that kind of a thing. When you talk about Hermetic magic and how Christians baptize themselves in water and then the Holy Spirit comes on it, as a pagan, I look at that and I say, oh, we say that they're born again and they have new life because they've been immersed in water and it's washed away their feelings and their guilt and their psychological problems. And that by itself is a powerful ritual. They come out of that feeling cleansed.
Oh, I'm afraid that a lot of people are going to go crazy and 5,000 emails on your server tomorrow morning because
what was that book you mentioned?
Because I think we all want to be part of your now. I mean, we're all moving to Pennsylvania, and I'm already booking the tickets.
Yeah.
But I guess it's not like that. So, how many people is a good group for you? What do you think makes sense, and when then in groups maybe split up, and just how? Again, I'm a seeker. One more time, I've listened to all of this. I heard you talk, and I'm fascinated, and what, again, one more time at the end, talk to the seekers listening, what they should do, what is the first step, what is the second step, a little bit. Just, the interests are now here.
Sure. So I think as a seeker, the first thing you have to understand is, choose your magical adventure kind of an idea. Do you want to be more nature oriented? Do you want to be more churchy or religious? Maybe you're a Muslim and so you get into Sufi mysticism. Maybe you're a Christian and so you get into Christian mysticism, or, Freemasonry, that kind of a thing. Or maybe you're somebody who's very nature based and you decide that you want to be a pagan. And so we'll say that they've picked pagan just as their thing. And then you have to decide, do you want to just be someone who practices magic? You have your candles and your crystals and your tarot cards, and you don't really want a group, and you don't want the tradition, and you don't want the format, and you just say, I want to practice magic. That's totally fine, right? There's a lot of people out there. In fact, when we do a lot of classes where we'll talk about tarot, is the last one that we did, we had a bunch of people show up and we didn't talk about Wicca at all. It was just like, this is how you do tarot cards and this is what it means. That's totally fine, right? If you do decide that you want to seek that experience, you have to decide what tradition you want to be in. And what's nice is we have all of these people who were super brave and they went forward and brought forth these traditions in the world. I mean, if you're a man who loves men, Ed Baczynski started the Minoan tradition, and they deal with those sorts of mysteries. If you're a woman and you love women, there's the Dianic tradition that Z Budapest started, and there's mysteries in that. And if you're somebody who's politically minded with your magic, there's Starhawk and Reclaiming, feminist tradition, and there's mysteries that appeal to that. And then if you're like me and you're boring and you're, married and you've got 3 kids, you've got the traditional Gardnerian path, where it is a fertility cult, and our central mystery is that generation of life between the male and the female, and all of our mysteries hang off of that, right? So as a seeker, find what appeals to you, what mysteries you want to see, whether you're, Gardnerian and you're interested in the fertility cult, or you're Minoan and you're interested in the male mysteries, or Dianic and you're interested in the female mysteries. There is almost like an embarrassment of riches to go down these paths and explore these places. And I'm sure that go talk to the group, go hop on Google, go hop on the websites, find a group near you, start hanging out with them, and having these sorts of conversations like we're having today.
How many Gardnerian groups are approximately in the US?
So Gardnerian groups are mostly East Coast. There are Californian groups, there are groups down sort of in the south of the United States. If you live in Idaho, you might be in trouble. I don't know, man. But, I can just speak for Pennsylvania. We've got a couple of covens in here. We all know each other. Sometimes we hang out. It's a fun group. New England has the concentration of covens because it really came in through Long Island from Europe. And then if you're over in Europe, I mean, that's where it all started, right? You guys have plenty of covens over in Europe, especially if you're
Seriously.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. So
I think there's the big difference between Europe and America is that starting with Freemasonry or whatnot, that is so much more open, so much more accessible, and it's a much more democratic approach by the end of the day. You can find a fitting group. In Europe, it's very secretive and usually very exclusive and very shut doors, and you just cannot just send an email and arrange a meeting. It's no way, no how.
Yeah, I'm sorry to hear that, because I feel like the covens have an obligation to put themselves out there for people's spiritual sustenance. I really do. And so I'm a little bit sorry to hear that, but I'm sure that if you start a podcast and put yourself out there, you'll find something.
I'm not so sure about Europe, my friend, in this case. Even if you have an amazing podcast, it's a world on its own.
Yeah.
But I guess in the end, everybody finds, you'll find, but the path will most probably be a couple of years, at least longer, than it would take you in the US to find a matching. So that's also very refreshing for me to listen to that, because listening to this with my European mind is like, what is he talking about?
Oh my goodness. You'll find something, man, if you look. I mean, I know a couple of people over in the UK. I know that that's pretty far from Germany, but I know people over in Europe. We can probably find something for you.
Yeah. I was asking honestly for my audience.
We'll find something for them too. Why not?
That's more appropriate. But thank you so very much. So, wait, I have to ask. So you think I would be Gardnerian material? You think I had the humor and the kindness and whatever? You would think I have a chance?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, you're personable. We've had a good talk. You know your stuff. You know things outside of like witchcraft, which is really what we're looking for. Is we're looking for that depth of experience. But then you've chosen witchcraft, and so for your seekers, if they do that, if they say, hey, I've been seeking, and that's why we call them seekers, but they've been seeking quite a while for this path, that's a good green light there. That tells me that person has rejected some things that aren't right for them. And they're looking for that training, and they're looking for the fertility cult, and they're looking for those religious experiences. That's the reason why I think it's important to be on these podcasts and talk about what's out there. Is I'm not going to tell you that there's only Gardnerian witchcraft. I'm not going to tell you that, we're the only game in town. I want people to find what's right for them. And I want people to realize that there's a depth of experience with this. And I want people to be able to find that spiritual sustenance. And maybe it's Gardnerian traditional Wicca and they're really into Gerald Gardner, and maybe it's not. Maybe it's something else. But the best thing I can do is help people along the road. You know what I mean?
Thank you so very much for coming out, for speaking and opening this world to my audience. I was fascinated from the first time we spoke, because it's a world that we all know so little about once we're not in. It's, I guess, by design in a sense.
Yeah.
And so I'm so thankful that you gave us, and I'm sorry about my budget question, but
no, it's fine, man.
We'll survive.
I get it. I mean, you walk into a church or a cathedral, and I appreciate that about Christianity, is the architecture and how pretty it is, and the stones and the buildings and the paintings, because these things took lifetimes to build, especially back in the day. I can appreciate that, but I also know that I'm never going to be able to afford to build a cathedral,
Yes. That's a beautiful ending, and thank you so very much. I'm now curious to see your land and your forest and the little stone circle and whatnot. And I have so many beautiful pictures in my head. Thank you so very much for giving me these pictures, and thank you so much for coming to our podcast. Thank you.
Sure, man. Thanks for having me.